Tonight, we travel back to Victorian London, a city of gaslight, horse-drawn carriages, fog-covered streets, and shadows that seem to move on their own. The London of the 1830s was unlike the city that we know today. There were no electric lights, no bright shop windows, no glowing screens illuminating the darkness. When night arrived, darkness truly arrived. Entire streets disappeared beneath thick blankets of fog. The glow of gas lamps became faint golden circles in the mist. Every sound carried strangely. Every footstep echoed. Every dark alley seemed capable of hiding something, waiting just beyond sight. For most Londoners, the city after dark was a place to be respected, a place where thieves prowled, where criminals hid, where danger lurked around corners. But soon, people began whispering about something far worse, something no one could explain, something that seemed almost impossible, a creature, a phantom, a demon, a thing that appeared from nowhere, terrified its victims, and vanished before anyone could catch it. They called it Spring Hill Jack. Even today, nearly 200 years later, no one knows exactly what he was. A man, a monster, a mass hallucination, or something altogether stranger. The mystery remains unsolved, and it begins on a cold London evening. The streets were unusually quiet. The fog drifted between buildings like pale smoke. The lamps struggled against the darkness. Shadows stretched across the cobblestones. Shopkeepers closed their doors. Families hurried home. Windows glowed warmly against the cold night, and somewhere in the distance, church bells marked the passing hour. For many Londoners, it seemed like an ordinary evening, yet rumors had already begun spreading. Stories exchanged in pubs, stories whispered between neighbors, stories that grew stranger each time they were told. People spoke of a figure seen moving across rooftops, a figure dressed in all black, a figure capable of impossible leaps. One witness claimed it had jumped over a wall. Nearly 9 feet high. Another swore it had cleared an entire valley in one single bound. Most people laughed. Surely it was nonsense, a prankster, an exaggeration, the product of an overactive imagination. But the stories continued, and before long, people began to disappear into their homes before nightfall. Because fear has a strange way of spreading, especially when no one knows exactly what it is they are afraid of. One of the earliest and most famous encounters involved a young woman walking home all alone. Her name has been lost to history, but her story remains. The fog that evening was thick, so thick that the far side of the street was almost invisible. The lamp seemed suspended in emptiness, floating golden orbs within an endless sea of grey. She walked quickly, eager to get home, eager to leave the cold behind. At first, she noticed nothing unusual, only the sound of her shoes against the cobblestone, only the distant rattle of carriage wheels, only the occasional gust of wind. Then she heard another sound. Footsteps. Behind her. Slow. Steady. Keeping pace. She told herself it was another pedestrian. Nothing more. Yet something felt wrong. The footsteps never grew closer. Never moved away. They simply followed, matching every step she took. The uneasy feeling in her stomach began to grow. She quickened her pace. The footsteps, they quickened too. She slowed. They slowed. And suddenly, she knew she was no longer alone. Mary stopped walking. The footsteps stopped too. A chill ran through her entire body. Slowly, she turned. At first, she saw nothing, only fog, only darkness, only the pale glow of distant gas lamps struggling against the night. Then, a shape emerged from the mist, standing at the entrance to a narrow alleyway. Tall, thin, motionless, just watching. Mary could not see the face clearly, only the outline. A dark coat, a strange hat, long arms hanging unnaturally still at its sides. For several seconds, neither of them moved. The silence felt wrong, heavy, as though the entire street were holding its breath. Then the figure took a simple step forward. Mary stepped back. The figure stepped again. And now she could see something she would later describe again and again. The eyes. They seemed to glow. Not brightly, not like lanterns, but with a strange pale light that did not belong to any human being. Fear surged through her. Every instinct screamed at her to run. Yet she remained frozen, unable to look away, unable to move. The figure smiled, a slow, unnatural smile. And then it plunged. Mary screamed. The figure crossed the distance between them with terrifying speed. Its hands reached toward her, long fingers ending in claw-like nails. Its face was pale beneath the rim of the hat. Too pale. The eyes, burned strangely within the darkness. And then came the sound she would never forget. Laughter. This was no ordinary laughter. Something sharp, wild, almost animal. The creature seemed to enjoy her fear. Mary turned and ran. Her shoes slipped on the wet cobblestone. Her breath burned in her chest. Behind her, she could hear movement, fast movement, yet the footsteps sounded strange. Not like someone running, more like someone bouncing, leaping, landing, then leaping again. She glanced over her shoulder, and what she saw would haunt her forever. The figure was no longer on the street. It was above her, perched atop a wall, watching, smiling, its glowing eyes fixed upon her. Then it jumped, not climbed, not scrambled, jumped, clearing a height no ordinary person should have been able to reach. For a moment it seemed to hang, suspended against the moonlight. Then it vanished beyond the rooftops. Mary never saw it again. But she was not the last, not even close. Because soon, all of London would begin talking about the thing now known as Spring Heel Jack. Within weeks, the stories were everywhere. In taverns, in markets, in drawing rooms, in newspaper offices, everywhere people gathered. They spoke of the mysterious figure. Witnesses came forward one after another, each account different, yet strangely similar. A tall man dressed in black clothing, glowing eyes, impossible leaps, and a habit of appearing from nowhere before disappearing into the darkness. Soon newspapers began printing the stories. Some mocked them, some treated them seriously. Others turned the creatures into a sensation. But every article added fuel to the growing panic. And the more people heard the stories, the more people began looking over their shoulders after dark. As winter deepened, the fear spread. People who had once laughed at the stories no longer found them amusing. Mothers warned their children not to wander after dark. Shopkeepers closed earlier than usual. Workers hurried home before sunset. The city itself seemed to change. Streets that had once been busy at night grew quieter. Windows were bolted, doors were bolted, and everywhere people asked the same question. What exactly was Spring Heel Jack? No one seemed able to agree. Some believed he was a criminal. Others insisted he was a wealthy aristocrat playing cruel games. A few believed something far darker, something not entirely human. Because the reports continued, and with every new sighting, the creature appeared less like a man and more like a nightmare. Witnesses claimed they saw him standing upon rooftops, watching, waiting, motionless against the moonlit sky. Then, with impossible ease, he would leap, not climb, not descend, leap, crossing distances no ordinary person should have been capable of crossing. Those who witnessed it never forgot the sight. A dark figure soaring above Victorian London before disappearing into the fog once more. And as the weeks passed, the sightings became stranger, far stranger. Witnesses no longer claimed to see Spring-Heeled Jack only on the streets. Now people reported seeing him above them, high above them, moving across the rooftops of Victorian London. At first the stories seemed impossible. No ordinary man could do what these witnesses described. Yet, the reports continued, one after another, from different districts, from different people, many of whom had never met. And yet, their descriptions remained remarkably similar. A dark figure, a long black coat, a strange hat, glowing eyes, and impossible leaps. One cold evening, 2 watchmen were patrolling a quiet street near the edge of the city. The fog had rolled in again, thick and heavy, turning every gas lamp into a pale golden blur. The men walked slowly, their boots striking the cobblestones, the only sound in the silence. Then one of them stopped. "Did you see that?" The other looked up. At first, he saw nothing, only rooftops, chimneys, fog. Then something moved, a shape, dark against the moonlit sky, standing atop a rooftop several buildings away. Neither man spoke. The figure seemed impossibly still, watching them, waiting. For several seconds, nothing happened. Then the figure crouched, slowly, almost like an animal preparing to spring. The watchmen exchanged nervous glances. And then it jumped, not climbed, not descended, jumped. The figure launched itself into the air, clearing a distance no human should have been capable of crossing. For a moment, it seemed suspended against the moonlight, floating, flying. Then it landed effortlessly above another rooftop. Neither watchman could believe what they had just seen. Yet, before they could react, the figure jumped again and again, moving across the skyline of London with terrifying ease. Within seconds, it vanished into the fog. Gone. As though it had never existed. The 2 men, they stood frozen, unable to explain what they had just witnessed, unable to forget it. And they were not alone. More sightings followed. Residents reported seeing the figure standing atop churches, watching from factory roofs, perched upon chimney stacks, sometimes motionless for several minutes, sometimes appearing for a second before disappearing once more. Some claimed the creature moved with the grace of an acrobat. Others insisted it moved like something not entirely human. And the more stories emerged, the more frightened London became. Because if Spring-Heeled Jack truly possessed such abilities, how could anyone escape him? How could anyone catch him? And most importantly, what exactly was he? Of all the encounters connected to Spring-Heeled Jack, none became more famous than the story of Jane Alsop. It was an account that shocked Victorian London, an account repeated in newspapers, discussed in homes, and remembered for generations. Because, unlike many sightings, Jane claimed she came face to face with the creature itself. The night was cold, the air heavy with fog. Jane was at home with her family when an urgent knocking came at the door. At first, nothing seemed unusual. Visitors often arrived after dark. Messengers frequently traveled throughout the city. But something about this knocking felt wrong. Desperate, urgent, insistent. Again and again and again. Eventually, Jane approached the door. Carefully, cautiously. When she opened it, a man stood outside. At least she thought it was a man. His face was difficult to see in the darkness. He wore dark clothing and appeared distressed. "Bring a light," the stranger called urgently. "Quick, bring a light." His voice sounded strained, breathless, as though something terrible had happened. Jane hesitated. The man pointed toward the darkness. "I'm a police officer," he said. "We have captured Spring-Heeled Jack." The name immediately caught her attention. Everyone in London knew the stories. Everyone had heard the rumors. The creature was becoming famous. And now, this man claimed the monster had finally been caught. Without realizing the danger, Jane fetched a candle, then stepped outside. The stranger moved closer, holding out his hand, requesting the light. Jane handed it to him, and for a brief moment, the candle illuminated his face. What she saw made her blood freeze. The eyes, bright, glowing, almost unnatural. The face looked wrong, too pale, too sharp, too frightening. Then the image she saw terrified her. The figure smiled, a terrible smile, and in an instant, everything changed. The story of Jane Alsop spread quickly, faster than any previous account, because her description contained details so strange, so unbelievable, that many people struggled to accept them. And yet Jane never changed her story, not once. She insisted that the creature she encountered was unlike any man she had ever seen. Its eyes glowed with an unnatural light. Its hands ended in sharp, claw-like fingers. And most disturbing of all, it appeared capable of breathing fire. The newspapers seized upon this detail immediately. Soon all of London was discussing it. Blue flames, not ordinary flames, not the ordinary orange glow of a lantern, but rather strange blue fire. Cold looking, almost supernatural. Some dismissed the claim as hysteria. Others believed Jane had simply been mistaken in the darkness. Yet before long, other witnesses began describing similar things. A flash of light near the creature's face. A strange blue glow. Something that appeared to erupt from its mouth during moments of excitement or anger. The reports only deepened the mystery, because if Spring-Heeled Jack was merely a prankster, how could he perform such a trick? And if he was not a prankster, what exactly was he? Theories spread throughout London. Some believed he carried hidden. Others suggested chemical tricks. Victorian inventors were already experimenting with unusual substances. Perhaps the creature had discovered some strange method of creating fire. But many people rejected such explanations. They believed the answer was far darker, far older, and far more frightening, because the creature's appearance itself seemed unnatural. Witness described pointed ears, sharp features, burning eyes, a face that seemed almost demonic. Priests spoke of evil spirits. Some whispered of demons walking among mankind. Others claimed the devil himself had come to London. And with every new rumour, fear grew stronger. The city was no longer frightened merely of an attacker. Now people feared something supernatural. Something that did not obey the rules of ordinary life. Something that appeared wherever it wished, vanished whenever it pleased, and watched from the darkness, waiting for its next victim. The story of Jane Alsop spread quickly, faster than any previous account, because her description contained details so strange, so unbelievable, that many people struggled to accept them. And yet Jane never changed her story. Not once. She insisted that the creature she encountered was unlike any man she had ever seen. Its eyes glowed with an unnatural light. Meanwhile, the authorities were growing increasingly frustrated, because despite countless sightings, despite newspaper reports, despite growing public panic, no one could catch Spring-Heeled Jack. No one could even explain him. And soon, the police would launch one of the strangest hunts in Victorian history. As the reports multiplied, the pressure upon London's authorities grew impossible to ignore. Newspaper editors demanded answers. Citizens demanded protection. And every morning seemed to bring fresh accounts of yet another sighting, another attack, another encounter with the mysterious figure. The police could no longer dismiss the stories as rumors. Whether Spring-Heeled Jack was a criminal, a prankster, or something far stranger, he had become a problem that required solving. And so the hunt began. Across London, constables increased their patrols. Officers walked the streets long after midnight. Lanterns glowed in the darkness as they searched alleyways, rooftops, courtyards, and abandoned buildings. Yet despite their efforts, Spring-Heeled Jack always seemed just one step ahead. Witnesses would report seeing him only moments before. A dark figure standing upon a rooftop, a shadow disappearing in the fog, a strange man watching from a distance. But by the time the police arrived, there was nothing. No footprints, no evidence, no trace at all. It was as though the city itself was helping him hide. One evening, several officers were dispatched after reports of sightings near a churchyard. The witness seemed genuinely terrified. He claimed he had seen a tall figure standing atop a stone wall, watching the street below. The officers hurried to the location, lanterns swinging as they ran. Rain fell steadily from the dark sky above. When they arrived, the wall stood empty. For a moment, disappointment settled over this group. Another false alarm. Another frightened witness. Then one of the officers looked upward and froze. High above them, on the roof of a nearby building, stood a figure. Tall, motionless, its dark silhouette outlined against the clouds. The officer raised his lantern. The figure seemed to turn toward them. For a brief moment, they could all see it. Watching, silent, patient. Then it moved. The figure crouched and launched itself into the air. The officers stared in disbelief. No human being should have been capable of such a leap. The distance alone seemed impossible, yet somehow the figure cleared it effortlessly, landing upon another rooftop before disappearing into the fog. Several officers gave chase immediately. They ran through narrow streets, past shuttered homes, past darkened taverns, past rows of gas lamps flickering in the rain. But the pursuit was hopeless. The creature was gone. Once again, Spring-Heeled Jack had escaped. And with every failed attempt to catch him, the legend grew stronger. Because if trained officers could not stop him, who could? Some began to wonder whether the answer was simple. Perhaps he could not be caught. Perhaps he was never meant to be. And that possibility frightened London more than anything else. Soon, the mystery would reach the highest levels of society, because the panic had become so widespread that even powerful figures within the city demanded answers. And before long, the strange case of Spring-Heeled Jack would find its way to the office of the Lord Mayor himself. By now, Spring-Heeled Jack was no longer merely a frightening story told in taverns. He had become a city-wide obsession. Every newspaper carried new reports. Every neighborhood seemed to have its own witness. Every week brought fresh rumours, and as fear spread across London, pressure began mounting upon those in power. Citizens demanded answers. Business owners demanded protection. Parents feared for their children. And the newspapers demanded action. Eventually, the strange mystery reached one of the most influential figures in the city, the Lord Mayor of London. His office was flooded with letters, witness statements, newspaper clippings, reports from frightened citizens. Some described a criminal, others described a lunatic, and many described something far more terrifying. A creature, a demon, a supernatural being roaming the streets after dark. At first, officials struggled to take this claim seriously. The reports often sounded absurd. Impossible leaps, glowing eyes, blue fire, vanishing into thin air. The story seemed more suited to a gothic novel than a police investigation. Yet there was one problem. The witnesses. There were simply too many of them. People from different parts of London. People from different backgrounds, different occupations, different ages. Many had never met, yet their descriptions remained strangely similar. The same dark figure, the same glowing eyes, the same impossible agility. And so, an investigation began. Meetings were held, witnesses were interviewed, police reports were reviewed, rewards were discussed. But every attempt to identify Spring Hill Jack led nowhere. No suspect could be confirmed. No explanation fit every sighting. And no arrest was ever made. The mystery only deepened. Some officials privately wondered whether several different individuals might be responsible. Perhaps pranksters were exploiting the panic. Perhaps ordinary criminals were using the legend as a cover. But even those explanations failed to answer the strangest reports. The rooftop leaps, the disappearances, the encounters that seemed almost impossible. Meanwhile, the newspapers continued printing increasingly dramatic headlines. Some claimed London was under attack. Others warned citizens never to travel alone after dark. One article referred to Spring Hill Jack as the terror of London. And soon, the title began appearing everywhere, because whether he was a man or a monster, London feared him, and fear was spreading faster than ever. Yet even as authorities searched for answers, another question was beginning to emerge. If Spring Hill Jack was real, what exactly was he? A criminal? An inventor? An aristocrat playing cruel games? Or something that belonged not to the streets of London, but to the nightmares of those who walked them? The theories were about to become stranger than the sightings itself. As the months passed and sightings continued, the panic continued, and the mystery deepened, because despite all the investigations, despite all the witnesses, despite all the newspaper reports, nobody could explain what Spring-Heeled Jack actually was. And when people cannot find answers, they create theories. Some were reasonable, others were extraordinary, and a few were utterly terrifying. One of the most popular theories suggested that Spring-Heeled Jack was simply a man, a clever man, a cruel man, someone who enjoyed frightening innocent people. Perhaps an aristocrat, perhaps a wealthy eccentric with too much time and too little conscience. Victorian London had no shortage of such individuals. Some believed the attacks were nothing more than elaborate pranks, dangerous pranks, but pranks nonetheless. Yet there was a problem. If Spring-Heeled Jack was merely a man, how could he perform the impossible leaps? How could he disappear so quickly? And why did witnesses from entirely different parts of the city describe the same terrifying features? The glowing eyes, the clawed hands, the unnatural appearance. The theory raised as many questions as it answered. Others proposed something even stranger. Perhaps Spring-Heeled Jack was an inventor. The Victorian age was a time of extraordinary innovation. New machines appeared constantly. New technologies transformed daily life. Some suggested he had developed spring-loaded boots, mechanical devices that allowed him to leap incredible distances. Others, they imagined hidden gadgets beneath his clothing, chemical devices capable of producing flames, ingenious inventions designed to terrify anyone unfortunate enough to encounter him. The newspapers loved these theories. They sounded modern, scientific, exciting. Yet no evidence was ever discovered. No machine, no device, no inventor stepping forward to claim responsibility. And so the mystery remained. But the darkest theories were still to come. Because many people had become convinced that Spring-Heeled Jack was not human at all. Priests spoke cautiously about evil spirits. Superstitious Londoners whispered of demons. Some claimed the creature had escaped from hell itself. Others believed it was a servant of darker powers, a thing that walked among humanity wearing the shape of a man. Witnesses often describe an overwhelming sense of dread when they encountered him, a feeling that something was profoundly wrong, not merely dangerous, but wrong, as though they were standing in the presence of something that did not belong in the world. And perhaps that was why the legend endured, not because people feared being attacked, not because they feared what creatures represented, the unknown, the unexplained, the possibility there were things in this world beyond understanding, things hiding within the darkness, watching, waiting, and occasionally revealing themselves just long enough to remind us that not every mystery has an answer. Years would pass. The panic would eventually fade. But Spring-Heeled Jack was not finished, because the sightings would continue, not just in London, but across England itself. And some would claim they had seen him long after he should have vanished forever. As the years passed, something strange began to happen. The panic that had once gripped London slowly faded. New scandals captured newspaper headlines. New crimes demanded attention. New fears replaced old ones. And gradually, Spring Hill Jack began slipping from public consciousness. But he did not disappear. At least, not completely, because reports continued to emerge, not just from London, but from towns and villages across England. The descriptions remained remarkably similar. A tall, dark figure, glowing eyes, impossible leaps, a sudden appearance, a sudden disappearance. In one account, several travelers claimed they saw a strange figure standing beside a lonely country road. At first they believed it was merely a man, a traveler like themselves. But as their carriage approached, the figure suddenly leapt over a nearby hedge. Not climbed, not vaulted, leapt, clearing the obstacle with absolute ease. Moments later, it vanished into the darkness. On another occasion, soldiers stationed at a military barracks reported seeing a dark figure moving across the rooftops. One witness later claimed the creature cleared a distance of nearly 30 feet in a single bound. His companions laughed at first, until they witnessed it themselves. Then the laughter stopped, because whatever they had seen, it should not have been possible. And yet, there it was, moving through the darkness as though gravity itself did not apply. Years turned into decades. Still, the stories persisted. Occasional sightings, brief encounters, fragments of the old legend refusing to die. Some reports appeared as late as the early 20th century, long after the original panic had faded, long after believed Spring Hill Jack belonged only to history. Yet, every now and then, someone would claim to have seen him, a dark figure standing upon a rooftop, a strange silhouette against the moon, a shape moving impossibly fast through the night, and always, before anyone could approach, before anyone could investigate, before anyone could understand what they had just seen, the figure would vanish, gone, leaving behind only questions. And perhaps that is why the legend survived, because mysteries are difficult to forget, especially mysteries that have never received an answer. Eventually, the sightings became fewer, then rarer still, until finally they stopped altogether. Or perhaps people simply stopped reporting them. Either way, Spring Hill Jack faded into legend. But legends have a habit of lingering, waiting patiently in the shadows.